Hello there, my name is Sophie and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to take you through every book I read in September and every book I'm hoping to and intending to read in October. September was, although not the most books I've read in 1 month, it was arguably one of my most successful reading months because I was one whole book away from finishing my... Was I? Maybe I was 2 books away from finishing my September TBR. There's only one book from my September TBR that I didn't even start. I finished, I think I had 8 books on my list. I finished 6 of them. I have started the 7th and I didn't get around to the 8th. That's it. There we go. So all round, pretty successful month. A whole stack here, so let's just jump right into it. Starting with, this is a hangover from my August book club pick. This was my August book club book and I didn't quite finish it until the first week of September, and that was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This is a highly acclaimed modern classic that I have only just gotten around to reading and I rated it 5 stars. I totally understand the hype. I think the perspective of the narrator being the personification, is it a personification? I don't know, but the narrator being death was a really interesting perspective, and I really liked some of the narrative decisions made by having the kind of, it is essentially a third person narrator with little segments of first person, but then it just reminds you that the whole thing is technically a first person narration from the perspective of death. Just found it really fascinating. It was a little bit slow in places. I don't know if it really needs to be over 500 pages long, but as you can see I did tab it quite enthusiastically. So yes, I really did enjoy this. I rated it 5 stars, but ironically not my favourite book of the month. I had 3 5-star books this month. Absolutely incredible. That's not even the first book. The first book I finished was an audiobook I got from the library, so I don't have anything physical to remind me that I read it. I finished the audiobook for One of Us Is Next, which is the second book in the One of Us Is Lying series by Karen M. McManus, which is a contemporary YA mystery thriller, which I very much enjoyed. I enjoyed this more than the first book in the series because I found the ending slightly less predictable. It was still a little bit predictable. I still kind of saw where it was going, but it didn't feel as stereotypical as the first one. It felt more satisfying that I figured it out rather than it fell into a relatively obvious plot resolution. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the characterization. I thought the characters were really fun, but again, I think I said this after I finished the first book in the series, I don't know what about it is going to turn into a sequel, so I've put the 3rd book on hold at my library, but yeah, hopefully going to finish that series soon. But started the month by finishing that, which I rated 4 stars. That was a great way to start the month. Then I read The Book Thief. Then I read what is not only my favourite book of the month, but what actually may be my favourite book of the year, and that is a new release, a new romance release. It's the 3rd book in the Maple Hills series, Daydream by Hannah Grace. Now, I know a lot of people are talking about Icebreaker at the moment. I don't know why. Icebreaker seems to be really popular with pre-teens, and it's totally not an appropriate book for them to be reading. But I am not of a preteen age, so it's an appropriate series for me to be reading. And either way, I think the first one of those books is the least appropriate anyway. This focuses on another member of the hockey team, Henry, and his love interest, Hallie, and they're just the sweetest. There's an author's note at the beginning from Hannah Grace, obviously, because she's the author, about how essentially Henry is neurodivergent coded, but he's not going to get a diagnosis in this book. He starts to understand himself a little bit more and he gets lots of support from his you know, friends and family, but it's never named. But I love that it's mentioned in the letter from the author because it just kind of puts that in the forefront of your mind, and it kind of takes that element of, well, is he intentionally neurodivergent coded or is he accidentally neurodivergent coded out of the equation. And I loved that. The neurodivergent rep in this book is incredible. I loved it. The anxiety rep in this book is incredible. I love Hallie and Henry. I adored Wildfire, the 2nd book in this series. I read the whole thing in less than 48 hours. This one took me a little bit longer, but I loved it even more. Honestly, this series just keeps getting better and better. I just love it. It's wholesome. This book is the only book this year that has actually nearly made me cry. I don't really cry at books at all, but it was almost a happy cry, which I would argue is even harder to evoke that much emotion from words. But the found family in this book is just precious. I just love the way that the people Henry and Hallie have in their lives treat them and support them. It's just the perfect example of female friendship and male friendship and communicative friendship. So arguably, if the preteens are reading this book, it may not be an appropriate read for the preteens, but at least they're hopefully learning something about really good friendship and important communication. Gotta take some pros somewhere, I think. Or not, maybe just stop the children reading icebreaker. Either way, I rated this 5 stars and I absolutely adored it. It is currently my favourite book that I've read so far this year. Then it was another audiobook read, but it was an audiobook read of a book on my physical TBR. This is the August Illumicrate book, Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. I went into this with below average expectations because the last few books I've read from Illumicrate have just not been the one, and this started on the same kind of vibe. It felt very overwritten. It was like, it's a debut author and you can tell it's a debut author. By the end of the novel, the whole narrative style had kind of settled into itself. The characters started to feel more real and less like someone writing a person. It just made so much more sense. The magic system wasn't very well developed or explained. There's this whole blood magic thing, but it's never really, unless it's my comprehension that missed it, it never really explains what that magic can do other than controlling other people. I still don't really understand, but there's 3 major players and lots of really well fleshed out periphery characters, and there's a ton of really good representation in this book. It addresses lots of arguably difficult topics in a very honest way, and I think it was really, really well done for a debut as well. It was a bit shaky at the beginning, but by the end I thought it was really good, and I'm looking forward to continuing this series when the next one comes out. And in the end, I think I rated this 3.5 stars. This is the book that made me bring 0.5 ratings back into my system, because it wasn't quite a 4-star book, but it was more than a 3-star book for sure. Then another book that I don't own physically, but it is a new release that I pre-ordered on my Kindle, and that is We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. This is the 5th fiction release from Richard Osman, and the first book that isn't in the Thursday Murder Club series, but it's still kind of in the same genre as the Thursday Murder Club, being another mystery, kind of cozy mystery, contemporary crime. But yeah, it falls very much into the same category as the Thursday Murder Club, but with some new characters. It very much has the same vibes as the Thursday Murder Club. It's got that very British kind of humour. It's really funny. It's one of those books that's kind of subtly funny. It's another one where there's actually a really sweet found family, where you've got people who should really be in, like you'd expect them to be in, really isolating jobs and really isolating parts of their lives, but actually they do have quite a rich support network, and that only shows to grow throughout the story. Yeah, it was really fun. I don't think it was anything groundbreaking. It really wasn't that different to the Thursday Murder Club. It just had different characters. You can tell that they probably exist in the same universe. But if you like the Thursday Murder Club, you will almost certainly like We Solve Murders. It was very fun. There's a reason that Richard Osman keeps writing best-selling books. He's quite good at it. Then we have my next instalment in the Famous 5 series, book 8, 5 Get Into Trouble. And actually, I rated this one 3.5 stars as well. By book 8 in a children's series, reading it as a woman who is not that far off 30, I was expecting that I was already getting bored of the series, and I was expecting it to be a downhill slide, uphill climb. There's a hill involved, but this one actually took me by surprise. I intended to binge read this at the end of the month because the audiobooks are on Spotify and they're only 4.5, 5 hours long, and because they're designed to be listened to by children, they're read really, really slowly, so I can listen to them at 2 times speed and still comprehend everything that's being said. That being someone who doesn't normally listen to books at 2 times speed. So I could read the whole thing in just over 2 hours. I intended to read it all in one night, but I got sleepy and did not make it through the whole book. But I read the whole thing in 2 sittings. It's definitely the best way for me to consume these at the moment, where I am literally just trying to get through them for the sake of it. But this one was more fun. The adventure and the kind of mystery element kicked off much earlier in the story, whereas in the last book, I think it took until about 75% for the mystery of the of the episode, I want to say, but the mystery of that book to reveal itself, whereas this one was very obvious early on. The story's kind of main character that isn't the main five came in quite quickly, and then it was all, I wouldn't say it was, well, no, it was obvious because it's a children's book, but it all it picked up a lot sooner, so I found myself less bored than I had been in previous books, and I've only got 2 of these left now, and I'm so excited that I've only got 2 left. Last but not least of the books I actually counted as reading, we have another audiobook. This is a book I picked up secondhand, but it's another one that I reckon is a modern classic, even though it was only released in 2011, I think, and that is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This has been on my TBR. I picked this up maybe 2022, so it's not been on my TBR for that long, but I think it's a really, really popular book, so I feel like I should have read it sooner. And I honestly, this is incredible. This is just mind-blowing. I was reading some of the reviews on Storygraph, and some of them were saying, oh, it was really obvious, I saw it coming, it was really boring, and I nearly felt offended by those comments because I didn't think it was obvious at all. The twist at the end honestly had me physically jaw agape, and to get like an actual physical reaction is like the difference between writing haha in a text and actually laughing, you know? I had physical reactions to some of the moments in this book, and honestly, I can hand on heart say I didn't see any of it coming. I thought Theo as a protagonist character was incredibly compelling. I listened to this as an audiobook, and the narrator was incredible. He had that kind of voice that just kind of sucks you in and really kind of pulled you in to be on side with the character. But then the diary entries from The Silent Patient, Alicia, were also incredibly narrated, and the way that the whole story intertwined was just incredible. I don't want to talk about it too much because I think I could accidentally spoil something. I think one of the things I really admire about this book is that even though it has become somewhat of a modern classic, and you know, so many millions of people have read it, before I went into it I still felt like I didn't really know anything about it. I know that the protagonist character Alicia had absolutely out of nowhere killed her husband and then gone completely mute. She just didn't talk, and then the whole premise of this story is a new psychotherapist comes in and his mission is to make Alicia talk again and try and understand what happened to her, and that's it. So there's so much more to this story that it's kind of like everyone that's read it is collectively keeping under wraps, and I think it's just brilliant. Hands down the best audiobook I've listened to so far this year, and one of the best books I've read so far this year. It doesn't beat Daydream because Daydream made my heart swell, but this, oh, just incredible, just incredible. I finished reading it just before my husband came home from work, and I was in 2 minds between wanting to tell him everything that happened so that he could like react with me and I could be like, isn't that incredible, but then also not wanting to tell him anything so that I can make him read it and then he can understand it all for himself. And I think that just says everything it needs to say. If you've read this book, please do let me know because I need to talk to someone about it. So those are the 7 books I actually read. Well, there's 5 here, 5 here, and then an ebook and a library audiobook. But I did kind of technically read another book this month. The September book club pick, TLDR, when my husband and I got married, we asked our guests to gift us a copy of their favourite book and in an endeavour to read them all. We take it in turns each month to pick a book, and generally I read it and he doesn't. But this month my husband chose The Forest of Doom, which is a fighting fantasy choose your own adventure book. So technically I have it feels more like a game than a book. So essentially you get introduced to the story and then you have a decision to make, and it's like if you choose X decision you go to this section, and if you choose Y decision you go to this section. So my husband and I turned this into like a date afternoon. So this is one book that he actually did kind of read, and we played through the game. We didn't win, we need to play it again to try and figure out the plot properly, but I didn't count it towards my reading goal because, you know, there's 212 pages in this book and I can't say that I've read all of them, so it doesn't feel like one that I should count towards my reading goal. But I did want to mention it because it's a book that we got as a wedding gift and it was our book club pick for this month, and I did technically read it. If playing it counts as reading it, it got a bit confusing, so I didn't count it on Storygraph, but I did want to mention it here. That's everything from September. Then we move on to the October TBR. So this is the first monthly TBR where I don't have an Illumicrate and an Afterlight book because I cancelled those subscriptions, and I've been really looking forward to this because I feel like I have complete control of my TBR again. It doesn't quite make sense, but I'm really excited either way. So I have 7 books on my TBR for this month, and I think, touch wood, I don't know, I don't want to jinx it, but I think this might be the first month that I actually read every book on my physical, no, not on my physical TBR. I'm not reading 400 books in a month. I think this might be the first month I finish every book on my monthly TBR. Jumping back into the wedding book club, it was my turn to pick this month, and I picked this book exclusively based on the fact that when I picked The Book Thief, it was the last book on my list alphabetically by author's surname. So when I was moving things around on my spreadsheet to move it from my to be read list to my read list, it was really easy to just move it from the bottom and not have to move and adjust anything else. So I just picked the next book that was last, which is a non-fiction book called Myths and Legends by Philip Wilkinson. This is an illustrated non-fiction book about myths and legends from all over the world, and it is heavy, it is hefty, but it is only 300 and something pages, and I've decided that rather than reading the whole thing in one sitting, which I think is an odd way to read this kind of non-fiction book, I'm going to try and read a few pages a day. I need to read 11 pages per day to finish this book by the end of the month. You might be able to see my little bookmark sticking out the top. I have made a start, and I'm actually really looking forward to this because I love mythology. It's kind of, I feel like mythology is the origin of fantasy, and I think this is going to really put me back into a fantasy mindset, which is, I think October's the right time of year for that. So that's my book club pick for this month. Then the rest of these books are in a weird order. Let's go with this one first. No, let's put them in a better order. Ugh. So my famous 5 book for this month is the 9th book in the series, obviously, because I read the 8th book last month, and that is 5 Fall Into Adventure. This book has 202 pages, so it's not too long, and I think I'm going to do the same thing where I try and binge read it at the end of the month. And then I might even go straight into book 10 just so it's done. I can't wait. I'm so excited to be at the end of this series. And honestly, it's picking up again, so who knows, I might really enjoy it. So that's book number 2. Then we have, these ones need a little bit more context because even though I have less, I used to call my monthly TBRs functional TBRs because I would have all these categories that I tried to meet. So I have my book club books, and I would have Illumicrate, and I would have Audible, and I would have new releases. And now there isn't really as many categories. I've still got my book club, I've still got new releases if I have any, but this new release comes with a caveat. So the new release I pre-ordered this month is A Pirate's Life for Tea by Rebecca Thorne. I got this beautiful special edition sprayed edge from Waterstones, and I'm really excited to read it, except this is book 2 in a series. Originally this series was indie published, and it's been picked up and it's being republished by traditional publishers. So this is book 2, and I had pre-ordered book 1 earlier this year, again with the beautiful special edition sprayed edges. But when I pre-ordered this earlier this year, I had much longer TBRs and didn't get around to reading it. So to be able to read book 2, I need to read book 1 first. I pre-ordered book 2, but I need to read book 1 to be able to get to book 2, so I had to put both on my TBR. So those are books 3 and 4. You may have seen the tassel floating. I have already started this book. I started listening to the audiobook, and so far it's a very gay and very cozy time, and I'm really looking forward to it. Then the last 3 books on my TBR are the ones I didn't pick. They're off my 24 and 2024 list, and I'm really bad at making decisions, so I used one of those spinners online, just put all the titles I have left on that list in the spinner, and I picked 3 for this month. Because my TBR was a little bit shorter, I thought I'd pick 3. So the first one I'm going to be reading is 0.4 by Mike Lancaster. I've definitely read this before. I remember buying this book as a teenager, but I'm now on a kind of, I read it so long ago that I can't really remember what happened, and I'm rereading it to decide whether I want to keep it on my shelves or whether I want to donate it. This is I think middle grade dystopian sci-fi kind of book, and I remember really enjoying it. I remember the vague premise, but I'm kind of rereading that to double check I actually still want it on my shelves. So that's one of the books from my 24 in 2024. Then we have another non-fiction. We have The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck by Sarah Knight. I feel like this book is going to give me the same vibes as The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, which I read last year and absolutely loved. So I'm really looking forward to reading this, and again, it's quite short, so I think I'm going to absolutely devour this, and I'm really looking forward to it. And then last but by no means least, the last book that the spinner gave me from my 24 in 2024 list is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I own this entire series that's out so far. I've got the novella, I've got the sequel, and I still haven't read any of them. I've seen so many mixed opinions about this online. I have no idea what I'm going to think about this book, but I have it. It's longer than I feel it maybe needs to be, and I have also picked up the audiobook, so I will be listening to this one, and I think it's going to be fun. This may lead to me binge reading the novella and the second book in the series. Yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant, but I am looking forward to finally understanding what everyone's talking about. And that is everything on my October TBR. That's a lot of books I've talked about in a very short amount of time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're reading a great book, and I'll see you next time for another bookish video. Bye!